I wish I could have just recorded it, guys. We just, you know, had to take a little W on that red TA, but it's hard to shift and drive and videotape at the same time. So I want to show you guys what it looks like when I do a pull. Let me show you the intake air temp as we're driving right now. Starting in 3, 2, 1. Woo! Not too shabby, boys. Not too bad, not too bad. What's up, YouTube? What's going on, guys? So today we're going to be talking about what is the best modification to do to your 03, 04 Cobra. Now, we're talking about Cobras with stock blowers. We're not going to get into the aftermarket blower world. When I'm talking about other Cobras and racing them, I'm talking about cars that have the stock blowers. I've raced one guy with a bigger blower. It was a 2.9, Whipple on it, made 800. That car whooped my butt. Let's get into this. So, what are we talking about, boys? It's going to be, how do you get to the best modifications for your car? Well, plain and simple, almost everybody on their car is going to do an intake, an exhaust, and, you know, start kind of from there. Assuming you have these things done already, that's where I'm kind of starting this. What is the best thing to do after you get, you know, your intake or your simple catback exhaust or your X-pipe? Because I recommend getting an X-pipe if you haven't got one, and at least a good intake like the JLT Ram Air. If you haven't seen my video of all the mods done to this, go check that video out. So, but yeah, you want to get a car and get those simple intakes done and have them, because those are the ground or the foundation for your setup to get going, you know, in the future. Unless you plan on doing, you know, like some crazy turbo setup. Obviously, I wouldn't buy an intake. I would just save the money and then do your turbo setup. But for us guys staying on a stock blower for a little while, let's go ahead, get ourselves an intake, get an exhaust. And then from there, where do we go? Because this is, you know, has been discussed, but not a lot of people know. And not a lot of people even know to get a good intake and good exhaust for these cars. So, like I said earlier, get a good intake, guys. This is huge. This is big, big, big for your car. It's gonna help you make power. It's gonna help your tuner. You're just gonna be so much happier when the car runs right, because your tuner can tune it well. Now, after we do that, I say, let's get into this next modification, which is gonna be pulleys. Most guys on these cars are gonna change pulleys out. What's a good pulley combination? Should you do what I did, where I went to a 12-pound lower with a stock upper? You absolutely could. And to be honest, it may be the cheapest route to go. There's guys that have done the exact opposite and done everything with an upper pulley. And that's cool, and that works too. But I've yet to see those guys that use upper pulleys make as much power or torque as my car. And a lot of those guys say, dang, cars with lowers make more torque. Now, I don't know how true this is. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, because when you add it to the lower, you're kind of giving the motor a little bit of an advantage. Those guys, I feel like, with just the way that it can feed more belts quicker with less, you know, rotation on the motor. So maybe it does. Maybe in that sense, it's a different way to do it, and it takes more torque, because I have to do that. So, what I recommend, guys, if you're going to do this, go find stuff that's reputable, that you trust, talk to your tuner, take his brain, get a little information from him, and get to know him. Because I think it's good to be on a personal level with your tuner and understand that. Now, next is going to be picking out your pulleys and what you want to do. I was a 12-pound lower, and I have to be very, very specific that I had one thing I had to change, which is your intercooler lines where they go down, there's a bracket that kind of space it out and bend it a little bit, and that solved my problem of my lower because it's so big wanting to touch them, and I've yet to have an issue. Now guys, with uppers, when they shrink them all the way down, the problem that they have is belt slip. So when you get to it, and it's, you know, your upper pulley this small, so now a lot of guys have belt slip if you're not on a 10 or, you know, 12 rib belt slip. That's why a lot of manufacturers like GM and even Ford now is like going 8 or 10 and 12 rib belt slip, just because they want every move that they can, and they also want to prevent people from changing the upper pulley so easily. They want to make it as soft think of it like literally this sandpaper and this paste that they just coat on your pulley, and now it's kind of rubbed so that way the belt really wants to dig in. Now that works, and that works well, but at the same time, you're gonna go through belts quickly because think of it, guys. Again, it's sandpaper on your rubber belt. It's gonna just wear that belt out. Sooner than later, you're gonna be replacing that belt. That's part of the reason why I went with my combo, and I went with all lower stock uppers. So we have a huge pulley, lots of belt wrap. At the same time, I didn't have to destroy my stock pulley, which I'll show you guys now. There she is, boys. Beautiful stock pulley, never been taken off. And yeah, so what can happen? You say, Chad, how do you destroy the pulley? Well, you have this half beam that goes behind here to pull on it, and you have something that goes in here to push. And this setup pushes the pulley. You're pushing on the snout here, and the pulley's getting pulled off. The problem with that is, when you're pushing back here, guys, this pulley wants to start deforming and actually starts pushing inward, and that then destroys the pulley, and you can no longer use it. So I didn't want to do that to this car. I felt as if it would be better to save all the factory parts. That way, if for some reason I die, or if my kids, you know, ever want to sell the car one day, because I'll never sell this car while I'm alive, but if they ever do, they would be able to put it back to stock, and I believe get the most bang for their buck, or most value back out of the car. So every mod I ever do with that, I keep that in mind, and I don't do it unless I can reverse it for the most part. There's some things like these caster camber plates that are not that way. There's a hole you drill, but that's part of that low life, you know. You got to keep your geometry straight, and you know, it is what it is. But that's probably the only part on this car that is not reversible. Getting back on topic, we want to make the most boost that we can out of this blower the most efficiently. So we're talking about I believe these are 1.9 liter Eatons. They may be 1.7s. I can't remember exactly off the top of my head, but that's not a very big blower, and so they can't support that much horsepower. Now, factory spec like this is non-ported, that's what I mean, stock upper, non-ported. The most you want to do on these is like what I have is a 12-pound lower. If I went to like a 13, 14-pound lower, if they made it, I don't know if they do or don't, that would just basically, instead of creating more airflow, I would just be creating more heat, because this supercharger is already being spun so fast, it can't compress more air more efficiently. Therefore, guys, it would just make my intake air temps rise, make my blower work harder. All it would do is act negative, and I don't want that. I would rather have it being underspun than overspun, because my blower's gonna live longer and it's easier on parts. There's guys that have ported blowers that can do that. You can spin beyond this 13, 14 pound threshold on a stock blower if you have a ported blower. So if you pull the blower off, send it to a company, have them, you know, port it, it will absolutely be able to produce more boost, specifically on the top end. And that's where this combination lacks. If you guys have seen or owned one of these cars and it's a stock blower and you see it, you'll mat it. Most of the times when it has pulleys, it'll peg that 10-pound, you know, PSI gauge, and then in the higher RPM, it'll start coming back. And the reason for that is it's just in non-ported form, not enough opening to allow for proper airflow, and it basically starts backing up in the supercharger. And that's where the heat starts getting created, guys, because we're not able to get that air out into the engine or the lower intake. It's getting stuck in there, and it's just getting compressed in there more, and the pressure in that specifically in the blower case is becoming higher and higher, which is creating more and more heat because it's got to make more boost to push it out. So that's the reason why when you go ported, you can pick up a little bit of boost up top, and you can spin it a little faster and make a little more boost throughout. Why would you do a, you know, all upper and not a stock lower? Well, or with a stock lower, I should say. Well, the reason for that is it's simple, it's cheap, and it's quick. If you went to like a 2.7 upper, you're gonna have a tiny upper, and it should be pretty cheap because all you gotta do is pull off the pulley and change it out. Well, that's what guys think, and that's a lot of the reason why they do it. But if you look at it from a mechanical standpoint, if you have to pay for it yourself, you don't have a mechanical, you know, background, or you don't have a mechanical buddy that can help you out and do it and actually have the tool to pull the pulley off, you're gonna pay labor. And that's probably, you know, a couple hours at any shop to pull it off, you know, pull the pulley off, swap it out, put the new one on, and set it up with the new belt. Now if you go with a lower, you're gonna have to do the same. You're gonna have to spend money on pulling the old lower off, which does take some time. It is a little more of a lengthy process versus the upper, but in the long run, if you ever change blowers or decide to change pulleys, it's really easy and you can change it very simply by just buying a new pulley, which you can do with the upper as well. But the lower is nice because you can always revert it back to stock if you wanted to, which you cannot when you do an upper, and I've never seen one done. You probably pay pretty close to the same when it's all said and done, but when you have an upper pulley only, you're gonna have that belt slip like I was talking about. So then you're gonna have to buy a idler kit, which is gonna give you one more idler to then help tension the belt. And what they'll do is, if you look right here, they basically get another idler kit that comes up over here and shoves the belt this way. Because this pulley gets so small, it's probably like yay big around. Well, you need this idler to come and push on it. And that just gives you like this. You can see how this has got a lot of belt wrap. The angle of the belt's coming up here and over here. That's a lot of belt wrap on this pulley. We're touching a lot of the surface area on this guy. And so you're trying to do the same with that pulley, is push it down here further so you get this extra wrap on that side of the pulley. So if you add that in, that's another couple hundred, $300-400 to get, you know, most guys get like a complete idler set. Most guys recommend, if you're gonna do that anyways, running those boost levels, you should do it. The beauty of kind of what I'm doing here is I haven't had any problems with my pulleys. What I think is the ultimate and the best combo for these cars is gonna be a 6-pound lower with like a 3.1 upper. I think hands down that's the best way to go, because there's lots of belt options there. Not like I don't have belt options, but it's just, I feel easier because you can get belts on and off. You have more room for your tensioner, whereas mine's a very tight fit, which I'll show you guys. If you look right here, I think that's what they're afraid of. So you guys can see that that's a tight distance. If you have a belt that's longer than the one that I have, you're gonna probably run into that issue. But my belt is so tight that I have a hard time slipping it on this pulley with the tensioner maxed out. It is literally barely slips on, which is perfect in my opinion, because as soon as it slips on, it brings the tensioner arm up to the top, so it's at its tightest point for good tensioning, and it works. It seems to work really well for me. I think it looks the best because you get a cool new pulley on your supercharger and you get a cool new pulley for your lower. It looks good.